Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. First things first, if you wouldn't mind giving me a like and a subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Today is going to be a pretty busy day. Now the reason why it's going to be so busy is because we are PDing our cows today. Now if you don't know what PD stands for, it stands for pregnancy diagnosis. So ultimately the vet comes on farm and they do an examination and they tell us what's in calf and what's not in calf, so we can work out if the bulls have worked. We can work out from how in calf they are, which bulls have worked, make sure they're all working properly, even though we do semen test them before we start. And yeah, we generally get an idea and a feel for when we're going to start calving in the spring, and if we've had any problems and any issues that we've got now that we can resolve before the spring. So that's why we're going to do it. But before we start and talk about PDing, we've got to actually get the cows in, because we've still got about 100 cows that need to be PD'd out at grass. So yeah, we've got to go get them in, because I think the vet's turn up about 12 o'clock. So we've got all morning, but there's going to be plenty to do. So the cattle are now all in. We bought the in-calf, well, hopefully in-calf heifers, and put them in the back ready to start. And I thought I'd just show you how we set up and how we were ready. So we brought the in-calf heifers up the back there and through this gate, and we've got this drafting gate here, so that we've got this top pen, which is where we normally have the finishing heifers. We've got that as a drafting pen, so anything that's not in calf can go straight in there, and they'll end up in the finishing yard as culls. We have the crush, obviously, where we're working. We'll PD everything and we put it on the screen on the computer, so that we know later on when we're calving, we can look and see if something should have calved, or if it's late or whatever, we can look at it on there. And we have the race. Now Dad's made a new bit on the race. It's quite a simple setup. Dad built this years ago, but it's essentially we've bedded the race down. We have the guillotine gate just here, so we'll shut that down so that the vet can come in here, because PDing is a rectal examination, so they'll put their hand inside their arse, essentially, and then essentially if the gate is down, the vet is safe, not going to have another cow come through. And because we're on cows, we're hoping to use this, and it's the first time we've used this on cows. Dad's made this. It's essentially to stop them backing up. It's a backing gate. The cows will push under it and then they can't back because it stops them. Well, we've used it on the finishing heifers when we've been weighing. It's worked really, really well. So we're hoping that that will mean we can have the back gate open to this race, and the cows will just flow straight down here and just keep filing in one behind the other. They generally flow pretty well. It means both me and Dad can be at the front then, doing any paperwork that we need to do. I have my paperwork on my little barrel, trusty old barrel. And yeah, this panel here is on a wheel, and we wheel it across so that the cows are all stuck behind. And then that was the old milking parlour donkeys years ago, and we now use it as just sort of sorting pens. There's 3 big pens in there, and so that's got the cows in, this has got cows in, and they'll just file straight down that race. And we use this gate as a pushing gate behind them, and all this is dead handy because it all folds flat back against the wall, so we don't need to take it down when we're feeding and whatever else, and we're feeding along here. Probably should say as well that anyone who follows me on Instagram would have seen that I was taking, or me and Dad were taking, some muck samples for checking for worms and such like in the herd, and we've sent them off and they've came back yesterday. We didn't have any worms at all, any fluke, nothing. So we didn't have to do any worming at all this autumn, which is wicked. We're putting that really down to our rotational grazing. We think that partly it's putting in the herbal lays, which a lot of the things like chicory and so on and so forth have a good sort of anti-worming properties in them. But we also think that it's because we're moving them every day onto new grass, so they're not having a worm build up in each spot, which, yeah, I think that's really, really good. So another benefit for doing your rotational grazing, if you're thinking about it, lack of wormer. saving money. That's what we need to be doing. Always saving money. I'm not gonna lie, that hasn't quite gone to plan. Most of them are in calf, which is good, and them that are in calf are really in calf. Like, we're gonna be really super busy when it gets beginning of March. We're carving like mad. But we have had more baroners than we were expecting and that we would like to have. I think it's important, you know, on this channel that I share the good and the bad and the ugly with you. And, you know, it's not always going to plan. It's not always going to be good news. We've ended up with, I think, 18 baroners, which is, yeah, upsetting. Especially considering how well we look after our cattle and how much we do for them. So ultimately, what does that mean? Well, we had one free martyr that we found in the heifers, which was a little bit annoying. But otherwise, they were all in calf. So really pleased with that, because heifers generally are the ones that you tend to find issues with. You know, perhaps aren't fertile and you don't know anything about it. So happy with that. And cow-wise, well, most of them were older cows. So it's got to be expected that you start to get fertility issues after about 7 or 8 years old. Some of them are 14 years old. So, you know, I suppose that's asking a little bit too much of them. One thing I am going to look at, though, is whether those that were not in calf were from the cows that were at Thornton that were set stocked, as opposed to those that were rotationally grazed, just see if there was a bit of a nutrition issue there. Something that'd be just interesting to know. These girls that are all in calf, they'll all be going back out now to grass for a few days, probably another week or so, and then they'll come back in properly for the winter. So it's now the next day. We've had a little bit of time to kind of mull over what's happened, think about it, think about what our options are moving forward, and feel a little bit better today. I felt really deflated yesterday, but not so bad now. The cows have all been separated. They're in a separate yard at the minute, just here. We can see them, they're just going in because I've started talking. We're gonna have those through the crush today, take their ear tag numbers, so we can look at all the data we've got, because data is your best friend in this situation. We can see where they've been running, what they've been doing, see if there's any kind of correlation we can draw between them and the reason why they may well be not in calf. We'll see what we can do with that data, whether that presents some sort of a management option we can look at moving forward. But the cows that weren't in calf, these will now be culled out of the herd, and that might seem harsh to some people if you're not into farming or you've never experienced this before. It might seem harsh to say, oh, they're not in calf, but we're now going to cull them out. But ultimately, we can't afford to keep them. There's not enough money in suckler herds to run them round. And what's to say that they're going to actually produce a calf next year? There's nothing to say that they will. There's a pretty good chance, actually, that if they're not in calf this year, that they're just not going to get in calf again. I'm sure there's probably some people thinking, well, maybe it's not a cow issue, maybe it's a bull issue, but we can rule out the fact that it's a bull issue on a couple of things. Firstly, we semen test all of our bulls before they go out. As a rule, every single one gets semen tested, and they were all fertile as they went out. And the other reason we can sort of say that it's not a bull issue is because the cows that are in calf are all at the beginning of the calving pattern. So, and we bull in 4 separate groups. So each bull has its own group. So actually that indicates that every bull served the cows that would be served. And ultimately the ones that are down in the bottom yard now, the ones that we pulled out that aren't in calf, they haven't got in calf, not because they haven't been served, but because for some reason they haven't held to the bull. Another thing that was interesting from yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw, but Katrina, the vet, when she did the examination, she puts her hand in the anus and she has these goggles on, and she's not watching Netflix on them. She's actually kind of using that's like an ultrasound scanner, and she has a little pack on the side with a lead that goes to the ultrasound scanner. So she does most of it by hand, and she can just tell from what she's feeling how far gone it is, how big the calf is, and so on and so forth. But any she's unsure of, she will put the scanner in, and any that are negative, she'll also scan, and she'll check the ovaries and so on and so forth, make sure that there's nothing glaringly obvious. And she checked and scanned every single one of those that weren't in calf, and there was nothing. She said there was no cysts, there was nothing that was strange about them, nothing that was kind of obvious, glaringly obvious from a medical point of view. So that's kind of an interesting thing to know, because obviously then it's more to do with the cow and their genetics and their genetic makeup as to why they are not getting in calf, more to do with their fecundity than it is to do with any kind of medical issue. So where do we go from here? We could potentially use the money from those guys, those cull cows, and reinvest it in some other cows. But as we were looking to go towards stabilizers anyway, we could buy some stabilizer cows that are potentially a bit older, or we could buy some more in-calf heifers and do something like that just to try and keep the numbers up. But we haven't actually decided yet what we're going to do. We need a few more days, I think, to think about that before we make a decision. But there are options on the table for us on how we move forward from here and how we progress the herd, because we don't really want numbers to drop back. There's obviously going to be drawbacks if we do buy in cattle from other herds though as well, because as I've said in other videos, we've got a really high health status on our farm. Another reason why it's slightly disappointing that we had a poor PD result. And if we do buy in cattle, that opens us up to disease that could be brought in from elsewhere. So that's something we've got to really keep in mind, something we've got to weigh up the pros and the cons of doing it, and the risk factors. Another good reason for doing your PD in, while I think about it, is that those cows will probably go in the finishing yard, and had the finishing ration this morning, started on that today. So straight away, they'll start and get fed up to get culled. So in a couple of months' time, that money will be in the bank. Whereas if we hadn't have PD'd, we would probably be realistically the end of June, because when the bulls come out, they essentially could calve any point up to the beginning of June. So you're looking middle of end of June, you'll probably be looking at those cows and thinking, why haven't they calved? And at which point you then find out they're not in calf, and then you'd put them on a finishing ration. You'd be a couple of months further on. So you could be nearly 12 months down the line before you cull those cows out. So for us, being efficient and managing the cattle herd and sort of having that PD result, although it's disappointing, is beneficial, because we're not going to be running more cows than we need to be moving forward. We can, do something with that space or with that grass or whatever. We can use it better and more efficiently and more profitably. So we have crunched all the numbers and had a look at what information we've got. Essentially put every bit of data we've got about the cows, and just see if there's any sort of correlation. We found that the majority of them were on the set stock ground, so nutrition could play an issue. And we also found, oddly, there was quite a number of 2017 born cows, which is strange because you would think that they'd be in their prime right now, and obviously they're not. So that's something that's going to be interesting. We're going to have to talk to the vets about. We've actually got a vet meeting tonight. It's actually about Yonis, and it's also the Christmas quiz, which is quite good. Everyone's wearing their Christmas jumpers. So we'll go there and we'll talk to the vets about, what we've found, and see if they suggest doing any testing, see where we go from here, really. It'd just be interesting to know if anyone else has had any sort of issues like this, and what you did and whatever else, because it's the first time for us. This is the worst PD result we've ever had, so yeah, bit of an unknown one. And that's it for another video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you wouldn't mind giving me a like and a subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Next week we have got a few things going on. We'll probably be bringing some of the cows in because they're still out of grass, And I've also got my grass mentor coming to visit on Monday the 20th. So I might see if he's interested in doing a video, because I think there could be some really good stuff there. I think we could really learn a lot. There's a lot of stuff that we could share and a lot of things that you guys could learn. But until then, stay safe, have a good one. See you soon.